The moment began like any other ordinary morning at the downtown Chicago office, busy but predictable, the kind of place where nothing dramatic ever seemed to happen, and that was exactly why Emma Reed never saw it coming. She stood near the coffee station, balancing a folder against her arm while scrolling through emails on her phone, her mind already moving ahead to the long list of tasks waiting for her, when the glass doors at the entrance slid open quietly. No one announced the arrival, no voices followed, yet something shifted in the room, subtle but sharp, like the air tightening. Emma looked up without knowing why, and that was when she saw her, Claire Harris. She had only seen her a few times before, always briefly, always from a distance, usually smiling politely during office events. Claire was tall, graceful, dressed in soft neutral colors that matched her calm presence, and she carried herself like someone used to being respected without asking for it. But this time was different. This time, Claire was not smiling. Her eyes moved slowly across the office, passing desks and faces, until they landed on Emma. The look that followed was not loud or angry, but it was powerful. Claire's face changed in a way that was impossible to miss. Her eyes widened just slightly, her lips parted as if she had been caught off guard, and for one brief second, her expression showed something raw: shock, confusion, maybe even hurt. Then, just as quickly, she covered it with a polite smile, but it was too late. Emma had seen it. Emma felt a sudden wave of unease roll through her chest, her fingers tightening around the folder as her heart skipped in a way that made no sense. She had done nothing wrong, she told herself. She was just an assistant, standing at work, doing her job. Yet her instincts told her otherwise. Claire's eyes stayed on her for a moment longer than necessary, as if trying to confirm something she had already begun to suspect. Emma forced a polite nod, unsure why she felt the need to acknowledge her, and Claire nodded back, slow and measured, before walking toward Daniel Harris's office. The room seemed to exhale after she passed, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something had just broken open. She replayed the moment in her mind again and again, trying to understand it. Why would Claire look at her like that? They barely knew each other. Emma had always kept her distance, always been careful. But as she glanced toward Daniel's office and saw him rise from his chair, surprise crossing his face as he noticed his wife standing there, a memory surfaced: late nights working together, quiet conversations that lingered too long, shared laughter that felt too personal, moments where Emma had caught Daniel watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. None of it had crossed a clear line, but now, standing there with her pulse racing, Emma wondered if lines could be crossed without being touched. Claire paused at Daniel's door, turned once more, and her gaze flicked back to Emma, softer this time but heavier, like a question left unanswered. Then she disappeared into the office, the door closing behind her with a gentle click that echoed louder in Emma's ears than it should have. The rest of the morning rushed by, phones ringing, emails flying, co-workers chatting, but Emma felt detached from it all, as if she were watching the day through glass. She kept thinking about Claire's face, that sudden change, that instant of recognition. It felt like the start of something she could not stop, something already in motion. And though no words had been spoken, Emma knew, deep down, that Claire Harris had seen more than just an employee that morning. She had seen a truth Emma herself had been too afraid to name. After that unsettling morning, life at the office didn't return to normal for Emma Reed, even though everything on the surface seemed unchanged. She arrived the next day, coffee in hand, trying to ignore the memory of Claire Harris's gaze, but it clung to her like a shadow. Daniel Harris was already at his desk, reviewing documents with his usual quiet intensity, his presence both familiar and strangely magnetic. Emma reminded herself to focus on her work, to keep the professional distance she had always maintained, but she couldn't help noticing the subtle ways Daniel's attention lingered when they spoke, the soft pauses in conversation that felt heavier than necessary, loaded with unsaid thoughts. They had always been careful, polite, and proper, and yet now every glance, every small gesture seemed charged with a hidden current, a tension neither of them could fully acknowledge. Emma began noticing little moments she had overlooked before, the way Daniel would tilt his chair to catch her eye across the office, the faint smile that appeared when she solved a problem without his prompting, the quiet tone he used when calling her over to review a report. It was intoxicating, confusing, and more than a little dangerous. And while their connection remained unspoken, the emotional tension built steadily, growing stronger with each shared task, each quiet conversation in the margins of the day. Meanwhile, Claire's presence became more frequent, subtle but deliberate, as though she was aware of the invisible bond growing between her husband and his assistant. She didn't confront Emma directly, but her eyes followed her movements in a way that made Emma acutely conscious of every step, every choice, every smile. Emma couldn't escape the feeling of being watched, of being measured against an invisible scale that only Claire controlled, and that awareness made every interaction with Daniel feel both thrilling and dangerous. Office hours stretched long, filled with deadlines and shared responsibilities, yet every moment seemed layered with emotion, a mix of longing, restraint, and unspoken attraction. Emma caught herself daydreaming about Daniel when he wasn't around, replaying his words in her head, analyzing the subtle inflections in his voice, imagining what might happen if circumstances were different. She hated herself for feeling this way, for allowing emotions to seep into a space that demanded professionalism, but the pull was undeniable. At the same time, Claire's subtle interventions, passing by with a polite nod, lingering near Emma's desk under the guise of casual conversation, or watching meetings from a distance, kept Emma on edge, her mind constantly alert to the possibility of being exposed, of being misread, or of crossing lines she could never uncross. And through it all, Daniel remained a quiet enigma, kind, attentive, and yet restrained, never allowing their connection to become overt, maintaining the fragile balance between what could be and what must remain hidden. The tension grew, threading through every shared glance and every accidental touch, until Emma realized that the office, once a place of routine, had become a battleground of emotion, desire, and unspoken longing. She felt trapped between loyalty and temptation, fear and attraction, professionalism and the magnetic pull of something deeper, something she couldn't name without feeling guilt. Each day, the slow unraveling of control, the quiet escalation of feelings, the subtle awareness of Claire's watchful eyes, all combined to make Emma feel like she was walking a tightrope, balancing between propriety and the emotional storm that was steadily growing, threatening to topple the careful structure of her life and her career, and leaving her wondering whether this tension would eventually erupt into something that no one could ignore. The storm that evening mirrored the chaos Emma felt inside, the rain hammering against the office windows while she and Daniel stayed behind, alone in the empty building, the usual buzz of phones and conversations replaced by the rhythmic sound of water against glass and the distant rumble of thunder. The air between them was thick, charged, and impossible to ignore, filled with months of suppressed emotions and silent tension that neither had acknowledged but both felt acutely. Papers lay scattered on Emma's desk as she tried to focus on finishing a report, her fingers moving mechanically, yet every glance at Daniel pulled her thoughts away from work and into the dangerous territory of feelings they had never spoken aloud. Daniel finally spoke, his voice low and hesitant, breaking the silence in a way that made her heart skip. "I never meant for this to be confusing," he admitted, his eyes avoiding hers for a moment before meeting them with an intensity that made her pulse race. Emma looked at him, unsure of what to say, unsure how to navigate the mixture of longing and guilt twisting in her chest. "Then why does it feel like it is?" she whispered, her voice trembling despite her effort to remain calm. Neither of them touched, and yet the space between them felt electric, filled with the weight of things left unsaid, with emotions that had grown too large to ignore. For a long while, they sat in silence, listening to the storm outside, both aware of the lines they had crossed in their hearts even if their actions remained proper. The next morning, Emma was surprised when Claire asked her to join her for coffee, an invitation that seemed casual but carried an unmistakable edge of purpose. At the cafe, Claire's calm exterior hid the storm Emma had seen in her eyes the first day, and yet her words carried the weight of awareness. "I saw the way you look at my husband," she said gently, her voice steady but not without emotion. "And I saw the way he looks at you." Emma's chest tightened, her mind racing, trying to formulate a response that could explain months of subtle glances, shared moments, and unspoken tension without betraying herself or Daniel. "Nothing happened," Emma said quickly, almost defensively, though her voice lacked conviction because she knew it was the truth and also the limitation of truth. They had not acted, yet the bond was undeniable. Claire's eyes softened, a mixture of sadness and understanding. "I know," she said quietly. "That's what hurts the most." Emma stared at her, realizing the depth of Claire's insight, the painful clarity with which she had observed something Emma herself had tried to ignore. Claire continued, "Some betrayals begin long before actions do. The words struck Emma harder than anything else, revealing the invisible lines that had already been crossed in heart and mind, and forcing her to confront the reality that attraction and emotional intimacy could be just as powerful and just as dangerous as physical acts. In that moment, Emma understood that the situation had already changed irrevocably, that the delicate balance she had clung to for months had shifted, and that the people involved, her, Daniel, and Claire, were all standing at the edge of something fragile, complex, and emotionally raw. The cafe's quiet hum seemed to fade as Emma absorbed the truth. Claire had seen everything, had felt the unspoken tension, and had chosen a measured, composed way to acknowledge it without confrontation, a choice that was both magnanimous and heartbreaking. Emma left the cafe with a mixture of relief, guilt, and a strange sense of inevitability, realizing that the unspoken emotions between her and Daniel could no longer remain in the shadows, and that the presence of Claire's understanding gaze had made their connection both more painful and more real. Each step back to the office felt heavier than before, every sound and every movement now colored by awareness of what had been recognized and what could never fully be acted upon, leaving Emma suspended in a state of emotional tension, caught between longing, restraint, and the harsh clarity that some truths must be felt fully even when they cannot be embraced, and knowing that the quiet storm within her heart had only just begun. The days that followed Daniel's quiet resignation were surreal. For Emma Reed, as if the office itself had shifted, losing its familiar rhythm and leaving her floating in a haze of unanswered questions and unresolved emotions, she arrived each morning to an emptier space, the hum of computers and chatter replaced by the echo of absence, and every familiar corner seemed to whisper reminders of what had been left behind. Daniel had slipped out without fanfare, no explanations, no dramatic confrontations, just a simple, professional departure that left Emma staring at his empty desk and the neatly stacked files he had once managed, feeling an unexpected void that was both painful and strangely liberating. The weight of everything unspoken between them pressed down, memories of shared glances, quiet conversations, and subtle touches that had never crossed into overt acts now replaying endlessly in her mind, a bittersweet loop that refused to let her move on entirely. Yet life demanded continuation, and Emma gradually rebuilt her routine, immersing herself in new projects, taking on responsibilities that Daniel had once overseen, finding comfort in the structure of her work even as the emotional undercurrent lingered like a shadow she could not shake. Months passed, the office buzz returning, colleagues filling spaces and conversations once again flowing, but Emma's thoughts often drifted back to the stormy night, to the quiet cafe with Claire, and to the complicated, unspoken emotions that had tied her to Daniel in a way that was both tender and impossible. Then, one afternoon, a small envelope arrived, unmarked, resting atop her desk like an unexpected gift. Emma hesitated, recognizing the handwriting immediately. It was Claire's. Hands slightly trembling, she opened it to find a single, concise note, words carefully chosen but weighted with meaning. "Thank you for leaving without making me ask. I hope you find a love that does not have to hide." Emma read the note over and over, each word cutting through the layers of guilt, longing, and sorrow she had been carrying, bringing with it a mix of relief and heartbreak. In Claire's words, she recognized closure she had not expected, a quiet acknowledgement that the bond she had shared with Daniel, though never physical, though never fully realized, was seen, understood, and let go with dignity. Sitting alone at her desk, Emma felt a tide of emotion wash over her, a blend of grief for what could have been and gratitude for the restraint that had prevented a more destructive path, understanding at last that love sometimes arrives in forms that are incomplete, unfulfilled, yet powerful enough to change the course of one's life. The letter left her with a strange sense of peace, a realization that the heartbreak was not from betrayal, but from the intensity of feelings that could never be acted upon, and that the most profound relationships are often those that teach us about ourselves even in absence. Days turned into weeks, and Emma carried the note in her bag as a quiet talisman, a reminder of the lessons she had learned, about longing, restraint, respect, and the delicate balance between desire and propriety. She began to open herself slowly to the world again, allowing small joys back into her routine, savoring quiet moments of reflection and the small victories in her work, while never forgetting the deep, unspoken connection that had shaped her in ways she could not have anticipated. The absence of Daniel, the silent understanding of Claire, and the unresolved yet profound emotional bond they had shared became a part of her story, a chapter of her life that was filled with longing and heartbreak, yet also with growth and clarity. Emma realized that some love stories are not defined by their duration or fulfillment, but by the way they linger in the heart, shaping who we are, guiding us toward choices grounded in respect, and reminding us that sometimes the most intense emotions are experienced quietly, internally, without dramatic closure, yet leaving a lasting imprint. She carried that knowledge forward, her steps lighter, her heart wiser, understanding that the most painful endings can also be the most enlightening, and that the quiet courage to step away, to honor the lives and hearts of others while protecting her own, was a strength she would cherish forever, even as the memory of what could have been continued to echo softly, a tender, poignant reminder of love, restraint, and the emotional depths we navigate in the most human of experiences.